Okay, so today's topic is brain structure. So we'll see what is the structure of the brain, what are the parts of the brain, the functions of various parts of the brain. The purpose of studying all these things is to study, because as per our syllabus our main topic it is EEG, that is electroencephalograph. So EEG is the electrical signal related to the activity of the brain. So before we study EEG, we should know what is the structure of the brain, what are different parts of the brain, and the functions of various parts. So to become familiar with that, we'll go through the structure of the brain, and in the next lecture we will study EEG, that is electroencephalograph. So before going to the PPTs, I will show you some small video related to our brain, and then after that I will continue with my PPT. So two small videos which are introduction to the central nervous system and brain, that will go through those, and then after that I will come back to my PPTs. So just a moment, I'm going to share with you.
The central nervous system. Objective: to learn about the central nervous system. The nervous system is responsible for sending, receiving, and interpreting information from all parts of the body. It responds to external stimuli and also monitors and coordinates the functions of internal organs. The central nervous system is composed of the brain and spinal cord. Both are enclosed in protective layers called meninges. The outer layer is called the dura mater. The middle layer is called the arachnoid mater, and the inner layer is called the pia mater. The subarachnoid space, or the space between the arachnoid and the pia mater, is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. The brain. The brain is located in the cranium of the skull. It is made of three main parts: the cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is divided into left and right hemispheres. Each is composed of a frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital lobe. The two hemispheres are connected by a nerve tract called the corpus callosum. The surface of the cerebral hemisphere is folded, which increases the surface area. The cerebrum is concerned with learning, memory, interpretation, and personality. The cerebellum is located in the back of the brain, just below the cerebrum. It controls balance, movement, and coordination. The brainstem is located beneath the cerebrum and in front of the cerebellum. It connects the brain with the spinal cord and is composed of the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. The brainstem controls a number of autonomic functions, including respiration and blood pressure. The spinal cord. The spinal cord extends from the medulla oblongata and down the back. It is protected by the vertebral column. The spinal cord is a hollow tube containing cerebrospinal fluid. 31 pairs of spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord. These nerves transmit information from body organs to the brain and from the brain to the organs. summary. The brain and the spinal cord comprise of the central nervous system. The brain is located in the cranium. The spinal cord is located in the vertebral column.
Let us watch one more video.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ben Webb. In this masterclass, we are going to learn about the structure and function of the brain. Let's start by introducing the general layout of the human brain. This layout is present from birth and is consistent in all animals from very primitive species all the way up to humans. What we see here is an adult human brain. At the bottom here, we have the spinal cord, which is bringing information into the brain and sending it back to the body. One thing to remember is that the closer we are to the spinal cord, the more basic functions are. Then we have the hindbrain and the midbrain, and finally you have the forebrain. Look how large that forebrain is in humans. This is where all of the thinking, emotions and memories are happening. So you can see as you move from bottom to the top of the brain, you change from basic functions that are trying to keep us alive to much more complex functions. So let's go to the actual structure and function. We're going to cover the major parts of the brain. You should always be thinking, what's the name of each part of the brain? Where is it? What's its function? What does it do? If you start with the basic brain plan, 4 structures jump right out at you. You can see the brainstem, then you have the cerebellum at the back of the brain. We then have a structure called the thalamus and hypothalamus below it. And finally we have the cerebrum in the upper part of the brain. So let's start with the brainstem. The brainstem is divided into 3 individual structures. If you start at the bottom, you have the medulla oblongata, then you have the pons, and at the top of the brainstem, you have the midbrain. These 3 structures make up what we call the brainstem. That's the structure, so what's its function? It does 2 things. First, it controls all of our basic needs, like keeping the heart beating, keeping circulation going, and digestion working. So you can see any damage to the brainstem is going to be catastrophic. The second thing it does is it sends signals to the rest of the body and receives them back. It has sensory information coming in from different parts of the body, and it issues commands to make the body move. It filters and routes this information to make sure it gets to the right places. Behind the brainstem, at the back of the brain, we have the cerebellum, the little brain. Its function is motor control. When you play sports, it is the cerebellum that gives you coordination and balance. It also gives you motor memory. So when you ride a bike and you remember to pedal and don't lose your balance, it's thanks to your cerebellum. Further up and above the brainstem, right there in the middle of your brain, is the thalamus. Imagine a busy train station like Grand Central Station or London Waterloo, where trains are constantly arriving and departing. Like a busy station, the thalamus is constantly receiving messages from all over the brain. It has to sort them and make sure they are relayed to the correct destination in the brain. Right here below the thalamus is the hypothalamus, which sits above the roof of your mouth near the pituitary gland. What does this do? Well, it maintains homeostasis. Via the pituitary gland, it releases hormones around the body and controls your body temperature, thirst, and sleep. If we move further up, we reach the cerebrum, which is responsible for the integration of complex sensory and neural functions. It contains billions of neurons and is responsible for performing higher functions like interpreting touch, interpreting vision, interpreting your hearing, as well as speech, emotions, thinking, control of movement, and even consciousness. Everything I've shown you is from the side of the brain. But if you flip the brain 90 degrees and look at the brain from the front, you can see that the brain actually consists of 2 halves, and these are called the cerebral hemispheres. There is a right and a left hemisphere. They're connected by this mass of nerves called the corpus callosum. There is a tendency in the brain for lateralization. We put some things on the left side of our brain, like mathematical reasoning and language, and other functions we put on the right side of our brain, like face recognition. Now, if we look right below the corpus callosum, we find this area called the basal ganglia. This collection of nuclei inside here are called the basal ganglia. What are nuclei? Well, they are collections of cells with the same functions. The main function of the basal ganglia is to coordinate all of our movements. And if this area stops working, people will unfortunately end up with Parkinson's disease. Now we have arrived at the cerebral cortex. That makes up about 80% of the brain, and it's divided into different lobes. So if you start at the front of the brain at what is called the frontal lobe, what's its function? Well, essentially it is the boss, the control center of the brain. It has executive control. By interacting with the rest of the brain, it controls a lot of our movements and emotions, and it's where our personality lives. People who have damage up there have huge changes to their personality and emotional swings. If we move back to the parietal lobe, what does that do? It's mainly involved in sensation and how we interact with the world around us. Inside this area you have the somatosensory cortex. When you map this area along the cerebral cortex, you can see it devotes huge amounts of the brain surface area to parts of the body like your fingers, your tongue, your lips. In other words, we have more neurons and a lot more sensory information coming in from more sensitive parts of our body. If you have damaged this part of the brain, you might end up ignoring part of your body or even one side of the world around you. Then we can move to the back here to the occipital lobe. It's the only lobe with a single unitary function, vision. It produces all of your visual perception of the world around you. The fact that so much cortex is devoted to vision shows what an important function it is for us and our survival. Damage to this part of the brain would effectively make you blind to everything on one side of the world. Then we move to the temporal lobe. This lobe is important in language, in hearing, recognizing faces and emotions, and also very important in memory. Damage to this part of the brain can cause complete amnesia, where you are unable to form any new memories. So you can see that each lobe is associated with different functions. That's the brain. Here is everything you've learned about its structure and function for you to review. See you in the next mini masterclass.
So it was about the overview of the brain. Now I will continue with my presentation. So the previous two videos you have seen about the brain. Now we are the similar points we will discuss in somewhat more detail in this presentation. So brain of our adult person, usually it weighs, the weight of the brain, it is around 1 to 1.5 kg, and it is composed of neurons, that is the fundamental unit of the brain, and nervous system. And there are around 86 billion to 100 billion neurons in an adult brain. Brain, along with the spinal cord, it constitutes the central nervous system, which is responsible for thoughts, interpretation, and origin of control of body movements. The brain is enclosed within the skull, which provides a frontal, lateral, and dorsal protection. Dorsal means the backside protection. And the skull consists of 22 bones, 14 of which form the facial bones, and the remaining 8 form the cranial bones. Cranial bones means in Marathi we call it as a kauti. Okay, so anatomically the brain is contained within the cranium and is surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid. So as you can see in this diagram, cranium, and the cerebrospinal fluid, it is a fluid that circulates within the skull and spinal cord, which fills up the hollow spaces on the surface of the brain. The primary function of this fluid, that is the cerebrospinal fluid, is to act as a buffer for the brain, and which provides a mechanical cushion to absorb shocks and dampens the minor jolts to the brain. And it also provides the immunological protection to the brain. CSF, that is the cerebrospinal fluid, it also provides buoyancy for the brain. So that means if the brain is suspended, that means the brain is suspended in layer of the fluid, wherein the weight of the brain is negated. If the brain is not suspended, then it would be impeded by the weight, and consequently it will cut off the blood supply in the lower half of the brain, and it may lead to the death of the neurons in the affected area. So that is in short about the brain. And as we have seen in the previous video, different parts of the brain, it is classified into forebrain, midbrain and the hindbrain. So the forebrain, which is the largest part of the brain, it consists of cerebrum, hypothalamus and thalamus. The forebrain controls the reproductive functions, body temperature, emotions, hunger and sleep. The largest among the forebrain, the largest part among the forebrain is the cerebrum. This is the largest part of forebrain. Then we have hypothalamus and thalamus. Then there is the another region of brain is the midbrain, and it is the smallest and the central part of the brain, and it consists of two parts, tectum and tegmentum. So this we'll discuss in brief in the later part. Then the third region of the brain, it is the hindbrain. So the hindbrain, it is made up of cerebellum, medulla and pons, that is the lower part. So the three regions of the hindbrain coordinate all processes necessary for our survival. So this includes breathing, heartbeat, sleep, wakefulness and motor learning. So this is about the different parts of the brain, that is forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Now the cerebrum, what you see in this diagram, this is again divided into different parts, the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe and temporal lobe. The frontal lobe is associated with parts of speech, planning, reasoning, problem solving and movements. Then the parietal lobe, this helps in movements, the perception of the stimulus and orientation. Then the occipital lobe, it is related to visual processing, whereas the temporal lobe, this region is related to the perception and recognition of memory, auditory stimuli and speech. The brain mostly consists of two types of tissues, gray matter and white matter. So the brain is made up of usually these two types of tissues, gray matter and white matter. So gray matter mainly consists of the various types of cells which make up the bulk of the brain, whereas the white matter is primarily composed of axons which connect various gray matter areas of the brain with each other. The cerebrum also includes sensory areas to receive the messages, then association areas, the areas which integrate the incoming sensory information, and it also forms a connection between sensory and motor areas. Then lastly, the motor areas. This area is responsible for the action of the voluntary muscles. The cerebrum, it is responsible for thinking, intelligence, consciousness and memory, and it is also responsible for interpreting touch, hearing and vision. Then the next part of the brain, it is a thalamus. Thalamus, the location, it is the central location what you see in both of these diagrams. The animation what you see, this I got it from Wikipedia. So thalamus is the brain's sensory switchboard located on the top of the brain stem. Brain stem, it is the smaller part, what yellow color you see in this animation. So this thalamus, it directs messages to the sensory areas in the cortex and transmits the replies to the cerebellum and the medulla. It receives information for all the senses except the smell. And this thalamus is a small structure located right above the brain stem and responsible for relaying sensory information from the sense organs. It is also responsible for transmitting motor information for movement and coordination. And this thalamus is found in the limbic system within the cerebrum. The limbic system is mainly responsible for the formation of new memories and storing past experiences. So this was about the thalamus. What you see, the red color in this animated part. Then the next one, it is hypothalamus. So the location of the hypothalamus, it is shown with this right arrow in the right side diagram, whereas you can also see it in this animation, the location of the thalamus. The small red spot what you see in this animation, front side. So the thalamus is a small structure located right above the brain stem, and it is responsible for relaying the sensory information from the, okay, that was about thalamus. Hypothalamus, as you can see here, is a small and essential part of the brain which is located precisely below the thalamus, and it is considered the primary region of the brain. And the important functions of this thalamus are receiving impulses, regulating the body temperature, controlling the mood and emotions. It controls the sense of taste and smell, and it synthesizes the body's essential hormones. It also coordinates the messages from the autonomous nervous system. It controls the appetite, the rate of heartbeat, and blood pressure. It forms an axis with the pituitary gland, which is the main link between the nervous and the endocrine system. So that is about hypothalamus. Then next, the tactum. So this tactum, as you see the purple color with purple color in both these diagrams, so it is the small portion of the brain located in the dorsal part of the midbrain. Dorsal means the backside of the midbrain. It serves as the relay center for sensory information from the ears to the cerebrum. It also controls reflex movements of the head, eye, and neck muscles. It provides a passage for the different neurons moving in and out of the cerebrum. So that is about the tectum, which is acting as a relay center for sensory information. Then the next part, it is a tegmentum, which is again nearby this tectum, what you see in both these diagrams, the tegmentum. So tegmentum is the region within the brain stem. It is a complex structure with various components, which is mainly involved in body movements, sleep, arousal, attention, and different necessary reflexes. It forms the platform for the midbrain and connects with the thalamus, cerebral cortex, and the spinal cord. Then we come to the next part, that is the cerebellum. So this cerebellum, as you see this region here in this figure, which is called as the little brain and is attached to the rear of the brainstem, which helps to control the and coordinate the voluntary movements and balance. So this cerebellum, it is the largest part of the brain and it is located in the posterior region of the medulla and pons. The cerebellum and cerebrum are separated by cerebellar tentorium and transverse fissure. Cortex is the outer surface of this cerebellum and its parallel ridges are called as folia. The cerebellum consists of two hemispheres. So as you can see here, on one side and on the other side, there are two hemispheres, the outer grey cortex and the inner white medulla. And this cerebellum, it is mainly responsible for coordinating and maintaining the body balance during walking, running, riding, and swimming, and also precision control of voluntary movements. The main functions of cerebellum are: it senses equilibrium, that means the balance, then it transfers information, It coordinates eye movement. It also enables precision control of the voluntary body movements. It predicts the future position of the body during a particular moment, and the cerebellum is also essential for making fine adjustments to our motor actions. And it coordinates and maintains the body balance and posture during walking, running, riding, swimming, etc. Then the next one, it is the medulla oblongata. So as you can see in the animation with the red color, that is medulla oblongata, as well as in the right side diagram at the bottom part, it is the medulla oblongata. So this medulla oblongata is a small structure which is present in the lowest region of the brain. It mainly controls the autonomous functions such as heartbeat, breathing, and digestion. It plays a primary role in connecting the spinal cord, pons, and cerebral cortex. It also helps in maintaining our posture and controlling our reflexes. Then the last one, that is the pons. So what you see in this diagram, pons, as well as in the animation shown with the red color. So pons is the primary structure of the brain stem, which is present between the midbrain and medulla oblongata. It serves as a relay signals between the lower cerebellum. Spinal cord, the brain, cerebrum, and other higher parts of the brain. Important functions of these pons are controlling sleep cycles, regulating the magnitude and frequency of the respiration. It transfers information between the cerebellum and motor cortex. Pons is also involved in sensations such as the sensation of taste, hearing, and balance. So this was the last part. We are going to discuss about the brain, called as the pons. So this is the overview of the brain structure, the various parts of the brain and their physical locations and the functionality. Okay. As I told in the beginning, the purpose of studying all these parts is we should have the overall idea of the brain, because our important topic as far as electronics engineers are concerned, it is the measurement of EEG, that is the EEG signal, that means electroencephalogram signal, and the measurement of this, the type of equipments or the electrodes used to measure this EEG, what are the characteristics of this EEG, and how to process this EEG, and so on. So we can perform all these activities only if you know how this EEG actually originates from the brain and what is the overall structure of the brain and the functionality. So in the next lecture we'll start with EEG. What is EEG? How it originated? What are the EEG waveforms? What are the frequency ranges, amplitudes, the types of electrodes we use, and so on. So that will start in the next lecture. For today, this is for today about the structure and the functionality of the brain. So if any questions, I will take the questions.